Hello everyone, I hope you all had a good holiday season. With the new year right around the corner, I figured I would make one more Let's Talk video to close out 2023. Today's topic is something I have been thinking about for quite a while now, though what finally motivated me to sit down and make a video talking about it is a piece of news that was released fairly recently, about 2 or 3 weeks ago. That news being that the Nickelodeon cartoon, the Casagrandes, is getting a movie that is to be released on Netflix sometime in 2024. Now, in regards to this news, I do not harbor any excitement. I do not have high expectations for this movie. If the movie is good, that's great, and maybe I'll check it out, though the odds do not seem to be in the movie's favor. The Casagrandes as a show I found to be a rather dull and pale imitation of the show it spun off from, The Loud House. And even still, The Loud House is a show that has very much become boring and complacent, and sometimes even unwatchable in its current state. The Loud House I found to be very enjoyable and fun to watch in its early seasons, but ever since the show's creator got fired, and for rightful reasons he should have gotten fired, the show has just fallen downhill. Now, some of you might be wondering why I am making a video on this topic if I do not care about the Casagrandes as a series, and I have overall low expectations for this movie. Well, here's the thing. I have low expectations that the Casagrandes movie will be good. However, there is a difference between a movie being good and a movie being successful. While it is unlikely that the movie will be good, at least in my opinion, there is still the distinct possibility that the movie will be successful. And in the event that it is, I believe a certain door could be opened for possibilities in the Nickelodeon world that could affect some of its other cartoons. Now, to explain what I mean by this, a little background. The Casagrandes is the first Nickelodeon cartoon with a female protagonist that is getting a movie, with exception to the Rugrats movie, Rugrats Go Wild, which was a crossover with the Wild Thornberrys. However, I don't count that one because that was more a Rugrats movie with the Wild Thornberrys in it, and it was not exclusively made for the Nicktoon, the Wild Thornberrys. So, the Casagrandes is the first Nicktoon with a female protagonist to be getting a movie. Now, the reason I put movie in quotes is because over the years, Nickelodeon cartoons, or Nicktoons, have seen many different calibers of a movie. You have actual theatrical movies that made it to the silver screen, such as the SpongeBob movies or the Rugrats movies. You also have Netflix movies that came on long after the show had ended its original run to kind of breathe some life back into it, such as Rocko's Modern Life Static Cling or Invader Zim Enter the Florpus. And then you have TV movies, which is an episode of the show that is movie length and is somewhat cinematic in scale, but ultimately was just a longer episode of the TV show, such as the Fairly OddParents movies Channel Chasers and Abracatastrophe. As a footnote, of the 3 movie categories I just listed off, those in the third category I do not count as full-on movies. I more see them as special episodes of the TV show. Just wanted to make that clear. And when it comes to Nickelodeon, it's always been more of the quote-unquote boys network. And if you look back at the shows, there is evidence of this, with the abundance of gross-out humor as far back as Ren and Stimpy, one of the original 3 Nickelodeon cartoons, and most of the protagonists of Nickelodeon shows are males. Usually they fall into the archetype of just an average adolescent male trying to go through life. Look at Doug Funny, Timmy Turner, Arnold Shortman, Lincoln Loud, the list goes on. Now, there are Nickelodeon cartoons with female protagonists. However, in most cases, these shows tend to be a bit more overlooked when it comes to those with the male protagonists. And that's not to say that they are inferior. The Casagrandes, I do think, is not a great Nicktoon, but there are many other Nicktoons with female protagonists that I think are quite good. My Life as a Teenage Robot, It's Pony, as well as a few others. So, what I'm getting at here is that if the Casagrandes movie is the first Nicktoon with a female protagonist to get a movie, then that could possibly open the door for other Nicktoons with female protagonists to get movies as well. We are currently living in an area of cartoon revivals. Hence, again, the Rocko's Modern Life and Invader Zim movies kind of reviving some life back into those series with their Netflix movies. You know, there's been a lot of push for a Jimmy Neutron revival. Ned's Declassified, the cast of that is doing a podcast and talking about possibly doing some kind of revival. The iCarly revival just recently got canceled on a cliffhanger. We live in a world where we are trying to relive old nostalgia by rebooting cartoons of yesteryear. And Nickelodeon has gotten behind this, and they've been able to capitalize off it quite well. There's also the Rugrats reboot, one I forgot to mention until now. So, with all that said, they're giving attention to all these shows, but they're kind of sweeping some of their cartoons with female protagonists under the rug. And I think that's rather unfortunate, as there are quite a few of them that are quite good. My Life as a Teenage Robot, which I mentioned before, The Wild Thornberrys, As Told by Ginger. I never watched As Told by Ginger or The Wild Thornberrys as much. I've seen a few episodes of those, and they seem to be promising, and they definitely seem like they could come back in some way. My Life as a Teenage Robot, however, is the big one. This is a show that got 3 seasons, which was a good run. However, it still felt like it was underutilized in terms of the potential that it had. One thing I have to give the show major props for is how experimental the general situations the characters get into is. And that simply boils down to the fact that not only is the main character, XJ9 Jenny Wakeman, a female, but also she's a bit older than your typical Nickelodeon protagonist. She's a teenager, 16 years old, give or take. And that allows her and her friends to get into different situations compared to most other Nicktoons. A Nicktoon that has a main character that's a boy who's between the ages of 9 and 12 gets into more kid-like situations, while Jenny and her friends are able to get into more teenage-like situations, primarily her, Brad, and Sheldon, who are the 3 primary teenage protagonists of the show. And I watched My Life as a Teenage Robot as a little kid. I was probably 7 or 8 years old when I watched it on Nicktoons Network reruns, and I still enjoyed the show. Even though some of the situations went over my head, I still enjoyed the show very much. And then, when I went back and rewatched it later, as an adult, I found myself enjoying the show in a whole new light because the situations were now more relatable to me, such as Jenny and Brad trying out for the high school football team, Jenny throwing a house party, Brad going joyriding, etc., etc. The situations are more relatable towards teenagers, so the show had a potential to draw in a different type of audience for the network, which is something that I don't think Nickelodeon took advantage of enough. I think they were so hyper-focused on their market of young boys between the age of 8 and 13 or so that they just kind of cast that show aside. So I think if My Life as a Teenage Robot were to come back, it would be great. And if the Casagrandes movie is successful enough to spur Nickelodeon to bring back other shows with female protagonists, I think this could possibly be a good catalyst. Another example would be the more recent Nickelodeon show, It's Pony. Now, this show is a bit more standard for Nickelodeon in the sense that the main character of this show, Annie Bramley, she's a very tomboyish girl. In fact, I think if you were to switch her out with a male protagonist, almost nothing about the show would change. With that said, it was still a rather fun show that was, once again, not lived up to its full potential. And even though that show was canceled fairly recently, I think if they were to bring it back in some way, I would be all there for it. I genuinely enjoyed it. I thought it was a simple yet fun show. Now, with all that said, it may sound like a lot is riding on this Casagrandes movie. And that is certainly possible, or maybe I'm way off base, who knows? Maybe Nickelodeon just sees it as another opportunity to cash in on the Loud House train. Or perhaps they are using it as a way to test the waters to see if a movie, based on a show of theirs with a female protagonist, can perform up to snuff as those with male protagonists. So, once again, while I don't have high expectations for this movie, I do kind of hope that it performs well, so it will in fact open the doors for maybe a My Life as a Teenage Robot Netflix movie, or an It's Pony Netflix movie, or some sort of revival. Because that would be cool to see. It would definitely be nice to see Nickelodeon finally reaching outside of their comfort zone a little bit, something they have been desperately needing to try for years now. So, what does the future hold? Only time will tell. So, that's all I have to say on the matter. Thank you all for listening, and Happy New Year.